A true genius admits that he or she knows nothing, says Albert Einstein. This is Walking Your Talk, a personal development podcast about leadership, authenticity, and courage. I'm Carolyn Taylor, and I've spent my life working with leaders in organizations on how to change their culture. But this is much more personal. If you want to be known as someone who walks your talk at work and beyond, then this podcast is for you. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Walking Your Talk, where we're going to continue to explore the theme of humility. I don't know. Three of the most powerful words, I think, and ones that I hear so rarely in organizations and meetings. I wonder whether you find the same thing. It seems as if we're paid to know, or at least we think we're paid to know, and we think we need to look like we know. And this creates such barriers to input, to learning, to improvement. Remember I said last week that the definition of humility was a modest view of one's own importance. So let's spread that a little bit further and look at a modest view of my perspective, of my point of view, of my knowledge. Because when I think I know all the answers, a number of things happen. I get arrogant, I get cocky, I don't listen. I see my role is to persuade and inform others. And even more, I don't ask for input. I've told you before, I think, that one of the roles that I play as a culture advisor is to observe ordinary business meetings. And one of the first things that I note down, I count, is how often I hear people say, I don't know. And then the follow-on question, which is, what do you think? It's often the first piece of feedback that I will give a team is just to practice those two things. I don't know. And what do you think about this? And as you do that, you'll find it is actually very transformational, but consider why it is that you don't do it more often. I think for some of us, we've genuinely built a mental model, which is that we do know best. And if we don't, we will cover that up because we mostly live in cultures that encourage people to know it all. I so often coach leaders about how they will tend to encourage the hero, the person who's got all the answers, and not reward and encourage those who admit that they don't have all the answers yet. So I think we start to learn to see ourselves as being quicker and more able to grasp facts or draw good conclusions than other people. And so therefore, accompanying that, we form a view that the input of others is not as likely to add value. So therefore, it's not worth asking for it. Is that you? I have to admit it is me often. So what I try to do is to imagine that even that it were true that I had a lot of information, that I was well informed or intelligent. But, and there's a big but here, how do you then build others? How do you surround yourself with people who become better than you? Or don't you? Because effectively you can never be more than the maximum that you can do then, and that's so limiting. The best leaders that I work for sidestep this kind of thinking. I've been working alongside another consultant recently who's masterful at this, and I know that she knows so much. But what she knows is not what she's interested in. Her focus is on drawing out from others what they know that would be valuable to them. And then they discover that they're wiser than they thought. And my colleague will often sit quietly and ask questions, which stem, by the way, from her deep knowledge, but which come over as very humble, really masterful. I have a lot to learn from her. Now, I hear a lot, and I'm sure you hear a lot, about how important it is for us to build cultures of speaking up. And I often look for the root cause of why people are not speaking up. And mostly, I'll hear it's because we have fear, and there's a lack of psychological safety. Well, people don't use that term, but, we know what we're talking about there. But even beyond that, I think it's because there's a lack of humility in leaders, a lack of interest in what others will say, and a lack of really a perceived need to hear it. So there's a kind of an assumption that we need to encourage people to speak up, but it comes from, it would be good for morale rather than from a deep valuing of what they say, which is based on really believing that I will learn something. What do you really think? I want to know, and I want to really listen. So if you start with that experiment on I don't know, you'll find it's quite an uncomfortable place. We can feel quite vulnerable and we tend to jump in with solutions. And I think as I talk to you now from home during this lockdown, during this pandemic, it's a good moment, I think, for all of us to really feel out that not knowing. Because for one of the few times there really is so much we don't know. I don't know what impact it's going to have on me, on my family. I don't know where I can travel. I don't know what our clients will want and what they won't want and how it will impact all of us. And I'd like to learn to be comfortable in that place and not to pretend that I'm always wise, because from that comes curiosity, which is one of my favorite states of mind. Because curiosity is really the beginning of learning. So that's the exercise for this week, to admit and to sit with that idea of I don't know, to listen and to deeply inquire of others and of yourself, and to find that place of curiosity and the openness which sits behind it. And in role modeling that, watch how others around you change. And I have been noticing that in all of the client team sessions that I've been a part of in the last month, is how much more vulnerable people are, how much more open they are, because nobody knows, and how much closer they feel as a result, and how willing to find out things and to learn things they never previously knew. So as you role model that, watch how other people around you change and offer up and step up into that open space that you've created. Because that's the humility that really is the beginning of creating an empowered culture, a curious culture, a learning culture. And next week, I want to go more deeply into the culture where we can admit mistakes, which is another really important part of humility. So I wish you well with this experiment in not knowing. And join me next week where we will cover making mistakes and the humility that sits behind that and all of the benefits. Thank you so much.